Thanks for reading thestartupfoundry.com. You're watching how Tim O'Reilly bootstrapped O'Reilly Media with happy accidents. Enjoy the show. Hi everyone, I'm Paul Hans from the Startup Foundry. Today we have a very special guest with us who's a true visionary, Tim O'Reilly. And if you're
Hi,
like,
Paul.
hi Tim, how are you doing?
All right.
Good. If you're like 99% of geeks, growing up you read a book that Tim's company, O'Reilly Publishing, has put out there. You know, like those programming books with those cute little animals on them. And Tim, one thing that I have to ask you is, what's the deal with the animals?
Well, it's something that started many, many years ago. When we first started publishing in the mid 80s, we were we were a little startup. We had no money, and so we couldn't pay for illustrations. We'd hired a designer and who came up with something very sort of generic, high-tech, geometric, and it just didn't seem right. So we were like 8 or 9 people in the company, and we had an all-hands meeting to review this first draft of covers, and I just shot him down. I just said, it's not us. And one of our writers went home and talked to her housemate, who happened to be a graphic designer who was working at Digital Equipment Corporation. And over the weekend, this woman, Edie Friedman, came up with the animal concept. She thought that Unix program names sounded like weird animals. And she did mock-ups for 7 covers just for free. I think it was really kind of great, given our history with open source software, that the covers were actually a gift to us from someone we did not know. Yeah, isn't that just like such a wonderful, testament to the gift culture of the net and open source? And we looked at them; they were really weird, because nobody had ever done anything like this. There's the guy who's now on the cover of Learning the VI Editor and Unix in a Nutshell with the big fingers and the big eyes, and the slender lorises that are on the cover of Sednock. She just really got these very, very graphic, and they were images, and they were from the Dover Pictorial Archive, so they were all 19th century illustrations, and so they were free, and they were just this unusual image, and we decided to go for it, and it worked. So it became our great brand. Edie eventually came to work for us and is still with the company 27 years later. So
Wow.
yeah.
So was O'Reilly Publishing, was that bootstrapped?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, our original investment was something like $500 of used furniture. Yeah. And we were originally a consulting company. We did tech writing for hire. And then I wanted to have products, so we started publishing. Actually, our original business model wasn't even publishing books. We went from publishing to licensing manuals to companies. So we say, oh, you need a Fortran manual too? You can hire us to write one in 6 months, or you can just have this one we already have, and we'll modify it for you in 6 weeks for 80% of the price. And but then we went from there to saying, well, some of these things, let's try them as books. It was actually one of these great lessons for an entrepreneur, because we did that pivot because we had a huge consulting contract that got canceled, and we had no work. And so in that time, we turned a couple of things we had into books and tried taking them down to a trade show, and it didn't really take off. We sold them for $5 each. It wasn't enough to pay the rent, but it was fun, and we got some good feedback. And from there, whenever we had downtime in our consulting business, we started writing more books, and we just wrote things that we thought were needed. We say, oh, there's no manual on Sednock, let's write one. Because all the Unix documentation were just research papers, and we just were using these tools a lot in our own work, and so we just started filling in the gaps in Unix documentation and selling them. And we didn't know any better. We didn't sell to bookstores. We sold direct to consumers, and we licensed to companies. And we were actually about $7 million in revenue before we were discovered by bookstores. And of course, bookstores then used to complain to us because they say, you're competing with us by selling direct to consumer. And we were like, no, we started selling direct to consumer long before you guys even knew we existed. So, and it's fun. And we also said, and notice our books sell really well in the bookstore, so it's not taking away from you, And one of those things, there were a lot of early bits of ignorance that were hugely helpful to us. For example, our earliest books didn't have spines. First, because they were just pamphlets and they were stapled. And later, because we said, hey, people really want these to lie flat, so we used comb binding even when they got fatter. And then later we got into this stuff called rep cover, which let the books lie flat. But because we didn't have spines, they couldn't shelve them with the other books. So we got our own section in bookstores with all the books face out. And people, all these other publishers would have to pay for that, and we got it for free, all this exposure. So that with the distinctive branding really, really made us. So it's one of those happy accidents. And I think it's a really testament to why it's important sometimes not to know too much about your market. There were another happy accident was that we started publishing books on topics that had traditionally been considered academic. And academic books were sold with a much smaller discount to bookstores, and so they would stock far fewer copies. And we didn't know any better, so when bookstores approached us, we said, well, what kind of discounts do you get? And they told us the discounts for, trade books, which are like, 50% instead of 30%. And we said, okay, and we gave them those kind of discounts, and so they stocked the books much more heavily, and all of a sudden all these topics like Unix became more mainstream as a result of our ignorance of that you were supposed to sell them at, academic discounts. So we had a lot of luck in those early days.